All right, today we're going to dive into this ancient story that honestly reads like a modern drama. It's a story of just incredible emotional whiplash. We're talking a swing from the highest of highs to a desperate, sudden low, and it all happens in just a few days. So, these are the very first words you hear in one of the most powerful victory songs ever written. I mean, just picture the scene for a second. The Israelites have just walked through the Red Sea on dry land. The entire Egyptian army that was chasing them, gone, wiped out by the sea. This song isn't just happy, it's pure, unfiltered triumph. And this was way more than just a song. It was a massive, collective explosion of relief and joy. You've got the whole nation celebrating. Moses is leading the men in this song, and his sister Miriam, she grabs her timbrel and leads all the women in dancing. It's an incredible moment. Okay, so to really get the full weight of this, we need to break this victory poem down a little bit. It's not just retelling events, it's really a piece of theological art. The song's power really comes from a few key ideas. First, it paints this picture of God as a divine warrior, fighting for them. Then it uses this incredible, vivid poetry to describe the enemy's complete and total defeat. And finally, it looks to the future, predicting how all the other nations are going to react when they hear about this. The language here is just stunning, you know? It really hammers home how final this defeat was. The Egyptian army didn't just drown. The text says they sank to the depths like a stone and sank like lead. Wow. You can almost feel the weight in those words, the speed, their absolute helplessness. Now get this. This is where the poem gets really clever. It actually quotes the enemy's own arrogant plan. I will pursue, I will overtake, my hand will destroy them. But what actually happened? It wasn't even a fight. The poem just says, you blew with your breath, and that was it. Game over. The contrast between their pride and how effortlessly they were defeated, it's just so powerful. So the victory song ends, the dancing stops, the celebration fades, and then, with an almost shocking suddenness, the whole story takes a sharp, unexpected turn. Think about this timeline. On day 0, they're singing at the top of their lungs about God's power to save them. But just 3 days later, after wandering in the desert with no water, all that euphoria is completely gone. It's a really interesting look at how quickly the memory of a huge miracle can get erased by a simple, immediate need like thirst. So they finally find water, but the relief just doesn't last. The water is totally undrinkable. And this introduces a completely new kind of problem. It's not a test of armies and chariots, it's a test of trust. The place is even named for this cruel twist of fate, Marah, which literally means bitter. Can you imagine? After 3 days of no water at all, finding a huge source of it that you can't even drink, that's almost worse. And what's the people's first reaction? They start grumbling against Moses, the very same guy who just led them through the sea, saying, what are we supposed to drink? The solution that comes is, well, it's simple, but it's also really profound. So the people complain to Moses. Moses in turn cries out to God for help, and God's instruction is a little strange. He shows Moses a piece of wood. Moses throws it in the water, and bam, the water becomes drinkable. The text never explains how it worked, which leaves you wondering about the symbolism, right? This ordinary object becomes the key to their survival. And the story makes one thing crystal clear. This wasn't just some random unlucky event. Right there, at this place called Bitter, the text says God put them to the test. This was intentional. The real question was, after seeing God's overwhelming power at the Red Sea, would they trust him with something as basic as finding a drink of water? So this test at Marah, it wasn't really just about the water. It was about setting a new rule for how they were going to journey forward. And what happens right after this shows the immediate payoff for learning that lesson. So right after they pass this test, God makes a promise. He says if they listen to him and follow his commands, he'll protect them. And then he gives himself a new name right on the spot. I am the Lord who heals you. So the healing of this bitter water becomes a huge symbol for a much bigger promise of healing and protection. And the payoff for getting through this test, it's immediate. And the contrast is just incredible. They leave Marah, the place of bitterness and complaining, and where's their very next stop? A place called Elim. And at Elim, they find 12 springs of fresh water and 70 palm trees. It's a lush oasis. The message could not be clearer. Getting through the test leads you straight to a place of rest and abundance. So this whole story leaves us with this really interesting tension. It asks a big question about the rhythm of life itself, you know? After you've had a huge win, a mountaintop experience, what should you expect to come next? Does that celebration just go on forever? Or is that great triumph often just getting you ready for the next test?